GOtv 47 Weekend Edition. Now, what does Kenya stand to gain from the United Nations General Assembly meetings? And of course, Kenya's gain as President William Ruto represented us there. You know, global recognition and a couple of things that many would want to speak about. But just what would it mean for us in the event that the president, bring this goodies home with the kind of political situation in the country? Just how favorable will the situation be for him to be able to achieve some of these things? And of course, we've spoken to two specialists in relation to that, but as well, we have some of the things that we understand very well would be helpful in terms of, making Kenyans be beneficiaries. Pretty much what has been happening over the years. But of course, this time around, Kenya was honored as a global champion of adequate housing. That is thanks to the affordable housing. Just how much of a difference does it bring, even though Kenyans back at home feel like they have been shortchanged as to the promises of President William Ruto. And of course, the recognition raises Kenya's diplomatic prestige. That is one thing that is a plus, as well as, of course, it's a platform that is going to help the country to advance reforms of the global financial architecture. And, at least at this very point, if this is successful at home, then automatically it paves way for the country to be recognized at that global level and appreciated even better. So there are calls for reforming the United Nations Security Council to better represent Africa. This calls from President William Ruto. And of course, there's also that element of him speaking of how Kenya can align to broader African and global South interest to ensure that they help advance the agenda at the UNGA level, and the same then will be appreciated. And we also look at some other things that are likely to be, viewed as benefits for the country, where Kenya, as I have said, was honored, And of course, yes, to this other one, let's see what would be the other one. And yes, Kenya as a voice of change, this would definitely, if that is, we are successful as to some of the proposals that were given by President William Ruto, then it would mean that we are considered as voices of change. But either way, it still stands as a situation because we have seen just how adamant President William Ruto has been in advancing the Pan-African agenda. Now, Kenya can as well lock in aid, development financing, trade deals, and technical cooperation if some of these requests are granted. Also, the push for renewal of extensions of AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act, with the US equally stand to be a plus, of course, if accorded, presenting its local achievements to us. And as well, some of other things that would be a plus for the country is that Ruto's call for reforms on promises, will definitely, of course, bring on board a lot for us. But equally, there are certain risks to that. And I think I started by highlighting some of these, where Ruto's calls would then mean that, of course, he risks international judgment. These are some of the things that we have been saying that, is this going to be welcomed so well at that international level? The bigger brothers for a long time, people have felt like there's not been any genuineness in them trying to pass or to push for certain agendas, especially on the question of climate and so much more. Advocated for issues like climate finance, reforms of UN Security Council, often after entrenched resistance. I think these are some of the things that I have highlighted earlier on. And the biggest question is just how open would they be, especially in these moments where we get to see some of these, elements of resistance from the bigger brother, perhaps, with bigger knowledge as to why this would not be accorded that easy. And so getting concrete agreements would certainly be a difficult thing. What will it take for African leaders, President William Ruto, for instance, to push so that the bigger brothers can warm up to these ideas and incorporate them and bring on board policies that are going to make Africa a better space, that are going to make Kenya in particular a better space? So Kenya's proposals require international partnership to commit to this. They require lots of funding from the very same key players to make sure that these commitments are then implemented. And as well, we're talking about favorable terms that are indeed going to be friendly. So as we ask all this, how well is the government, able to convert the UNGA outcomes into domestic policy and implementation? Is, of course, this is something that is in the balance as well. When we talk about the feeling locally, like I have said, a majority of Kenyans feel like, well, unfortunately, the president is selling so big, at that, international level, but perhaps this is not what we get to experience at home. So political opponents have critiqued him, and I think we have seen out of the stories that we have carried, and of course they say that they do not get to see tangible benefits out of the Kenya Kwanza government in the country. So why would we trust the president with some of these proposals that he's presenting at that global stage? So let's listen in to what some of these specialists think as to what we are likely to see as benefits in the country after this, great performance of the president at that global stage.
The president painted quite a strategic vision for the climate agenda, not just for Kenya, but for Africa at the 80th United Nations General Assembly.
Yeah, we have tried over time to redefine our position in the climate space. And one way we have tried that is by amending the Climate Change Act of 2016 so that we can meet the standards of including the carbon markets into the equation. And we have also tried to develop frameworks which will support the implementation of the Act itself. So, for example, the climate change action plans, and continually updating them.
Those who look at the future with a clear vision will see that climate change is not only the greatest existential threat right now, but also a very great opportunity for transformation. Now, the $56 billion that he mentioned is captured in Kenya's second set of NDCs. And it is ambitious, it is grand, as you put it, but it's quite detailed in terms of what amount of money comes from where. You'll find that about 19% is meant to come from catalytic public finance, to de-risk private sector investment, to de-risk investment in the green space and all that. About 81% is actually estimated that it will come from the private sector. And the private sector is a very critical engine in the conversation about climate change. As for instance, at KCIC, we have seen this immense potential because to sustainably address climate change, you need to do it at the intersection of innovation and entrepreneurship. When you enterprise, you take things mainstream and you're able to address both production and consumption model. So a lot of that percentage of that financing is expected to come from the private sector. And we need to build local capacity to be able to do that. We need to build a policy ecosystem that can enable that to happen. And so there are a lot of policy incentives that need to be done. Rebates for R&D on matters green investments, de-risking climate innovations, climate enterprises, and a lot of potential is there.
When you look at the National Climate Change Action Plan, it indicates the 2023 and 2020, I think it will expire in 2027. Chapter 5, Section 5.8 particularly, it addresses aspect to do with children and youth as the priority area. And one of the issues the government aims at doing is increasing the participation levels and literacy levels of